Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the shadows of Mount Selene, where a cave cuts through the rock like a secret waiting to be told. It smells faintly of moss, goat, and prophecy. A cool wind hums through its entrance, carrying the gentle rattle of pebbles disturbed by something small, quick, and almost certainly up to no good. Because in this cave, a god has just been born. Not just any god, barely minutes old, and already squirming with schemes. You'll imagine yourself watching the moment unfold in real time. The cave glows faintly with divine light. Maya, a minor goddess and certified exhausted new mum, tries to swaddle her newborn, but Hermes, blinking, cooing, maybe even smirking, has other ideas. He stretches once, twice, and then just walks off. Not crawls, walks, like full toddler stride, while his mother is still processing the afterbirth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a quiet corner of the world, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. I love hearing where you dreaming from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail behind the newborn god, keeping a respectful distance, just in case he spontaneously invents a laser. He doesn't. Not yet, but he does invent something else. Mischief. Some say he slips out of the cave just after midnight and immediately heads for the nearest herd of sacred cows. These aren't just any cows. They belong to Apollo, sun god, music god, god most likely to throw a very bright tantrum. But Hermes, being literal hours old, sees opportunity, not consequences. And here's where things get interesting. According to the Homeric hymns, ancient Greek lullabies for insomniac scholars, Hermes doesn't just steal the cows, he covers his tracks. Literally, he turns their hooves backward, walks them in reverse, and even invents primitive sandals made from tree bark and cowhide to throw off anyone following. This is baby-level brilliance meets Ocean's 11. And if you're thinking, okay, but how does a newborn god pull this off? Well, remember, these myths aren't meant to be fair. They're meant to be weirdly impressive. At some point during his moonlit cow heist stroll, Hermes pauses. There's a tortoise, minding its business, probably pondering existential snail questions. Hermes scoops it up. This is not good news for the tortoise, but we'll get to that in the next section. For now, Hermes drags the cattle into a hidden grotto, ties them up with vines, and smiles. He hasn't just stolen livestock, he's challenged hierarchy. He dared Apollo, basically the teacher's pet of Olympus, to come looking for him. Meanwhile, back at the cave, Maya is doing her best. I swear I left him right here. Routine. When Hermes returns looking suspiciously smug, and maybe still a little damp from a puddle he didn't bother to walk around, Mia is not thrilled. But how do you punish a baby god who just rewrote the rules of gravity and plausibility? Zeus, when he finds out, doesn't rage, he laughs. And historians still argue whether this is a sign of fatherly affection, or just Zeus being so thoroughly exhausted by his family that chaos now feels comforting. Either way, Hermes gets away with it. You lie back a little in your mind's eye, letting the chill of that cave fade into soft warmth. You picture the stars above Mount Selene, blinking with curiosity. Somewhere, a tortoise shell is about to get a very dramatic makeover. And somewhere deeper still, a newborn god is falling asleep with the faintest smirk curling the edge of his lips. You open your eyes, still nestled in the shadows of Mount Selene. Hermes, looking far too pleased with himself for someone not even out of infancy, stretches his arms and yawns like he didn't just commit divine-level livestock larceny, But remember that tortoise he picked up? Yeah, this is where things take a turn for the musically bizarre. Hermes sets the tortoise on a flat rock, eyes it thoughtfully, then does something that will live in the footnotes of both music history and questionable ethics. He hollows out the shell, stretches some strings across it, and invents the world's first lyre. You can almost hear it. A soft, twangy pluck, echoing through the cave like a lullaby played on a banjo made of gilt. It's haunting, it's beautiful, and it's built entirely out of a confused reptile. This lyre, this turtle harp hybrid, becomes Hermes' favorite thing right after stealing, lying, and looking innocent while doing both, the next day or maybe the same night, depending on which poet was making stuff up. At the time Apollo discovers his cattle are missing, and unlike Hermes, who has all the chill of a toddler in a candy store, Apollo is furious. You follow him, sandals smacking against sun-baked earth, as he storms toward Mayor S' cave like a dad who S just realized someone keyed his chariot. He bursts in, golden and glowing, and very much not in the mood for baby talk. And there's Hermes, swaddled, blinking, and giving the performance of a lifetime. He frictions. He even pretends he doesn't know what a cow is. Apollo, not convinced, starts shouting. But Hermes braced yourselves, lying, aggressively, dramatically, with all the flair of someone who will someday inspire both courtroom drama and improv comedy. He claims he was just born. He doesn't even know how to walk. Honestly, cow sounds like a made-up word. Maybe Apollo needs to calm down. And here's the weird part. This act almost works. Hermes is so good at this that Apollo has to drag him, swaddle and all, up to Mount Olympus and demand a trial in front of Zeus. Which is, let's be honest, one of the funniest things that's ever happened on Olympus. You picture the courtroom. Zeus sitting on his oversized throne, mildly entertained. Apollo fuming, gesturing wildly. Hermes pretending to nap, then suddenly pulling out the lyre and playing a little tune like, "Oops, I invented music. It's bold, it's unhinged, it's Hermes in a nutshell." And the two know it works. Apollo is mesmerized. The anger slips from his face like sunlight behind clouds. In a stunning act of musical bribery, Hermes offers him the lyre, and Apollo, completely forgetting the cows, accepts it like a toddler being handed a shiny toy during a tantrum. He even gives Hermes the caduceus in Rotona wand with two snakes, which will become Hermes' iconic symbol. It's hard not to laugh softly as you lie there, imagining a courtroom resolved not with justice, but with jazz. Here's a fun fact, buried in the scrolls of myth. Apollo, despite his sunny disposition, was always sort of intense. And Hermes was the opposite of intense. He was chill, dangerously chill. Historians still argue whether this lyre bribe moment was an actual peace treaty or just the first in a long line of Hermes learning how to hustle the divine system. Either way, Zeus is delighted. He chuckles, pats Hermes on the head, and officially declares him the god of trickery, music, and whatever this kid decides to invent next. Meanwhile, Apollo walks off, strumming his new toy, cows completely forgotten, and Maya, she's just glad the baby is someone else's problem now. The story winds down like the echo of lyre strings across a canyon. You can still hear it soft, strange, ancient, the kind of sound that dances on the edge of dreams, a lullaby written by a god who was too clever for his own diapers, and just like that, Hermes goes from cave baby to divine prankster with full Olympus clearance. You're still drifting along with Hermes, now an official deity of Olympus, but he hasn't lost that sly sparkle in his eyes. In fact, the moment he's done dazzling Apollo with turtle music, he gets bored. And when Hermes gets bored, The universe tends to get a new invention or a new problem. Tonight, you're walking with him through a sun-drenched meadow, toes brushing soft wildflowers. The air is thick with bees, birdsong, and the low, contented grumble of cows that aren't being stolen this time. Hermes is fiddling with something in his hands. Wood? String? Gut? Maybe. It's hard to say. He's not really into sharing the process. But he's building something again. This time, it's more refined than the lyre. It hums with potential. A future full of poets, musicians, awkward middle school recitals. And then he just tosses it behind a bush, already over it. Because Hermes is the kind of god who creates brilliance in passing, not out of effort. He likes to move. He likes speed, so he invents sandals. But not just any sandals, these have wings, little golden ones, like butterfly kissers stuck to leather. He laces them up, hops once, and zips into the air like he's late for a divine appointment he definitely forgot about. From here on out, Hermes isn't just the god of trickery, he's the god of motion, of communication, of slipping in and out of places without ever being noticed, unless he wants to be. And with those winged sandals comes his next great passion. Delivering stuff, scrolls, secrets, sweet nothings from Zeus to whatever. Poor nymph is currently on Olympus' roster of doomed romances. Hermes becomes the mailman of the gods. But if your mailman also gossiped, stole your lunch, and invented Monopoly on his break. And here's a fun fringe detail that scholars like to raise their eyebrows at. Hermes may have invented both barter and theft in the same week, which is kind of like opening a bank and robbing it before noon. He introduces the first marketplace, his little open-air hubs where mortals can trade goods, swap stories, and, inevitably, be swindled. Commerce, thanks to Hermes, becomes equal parts progress and prank. But you're probably wondering, did Hermes ever get consequences? Not really, because Zeus, weirdly, likes him. Maybe it's because Hermes doesn't challenge Zeus' power, he just dances around it, pokes it with a stick, and leaves before things explode. Historians still argue whether Hermes was the only Olympian who truly understood power, not by wielding it, but by staying slippery enough to avoid its worst moods. You watch as Hermes lands gracefully beside a mortal shepherd. The guy's been tending goats all day, sweaty, tired, probably just wants a nap. Hermes, he sells him a rock, not a magic rock, just a rock. But the story Hermes tells makes it sound like it's a fertility charm, a god-attracting talisman, and possibly a love letter from Aphrodite. The shepherd pays 3 silver coins. Hermes pockets them, winks, and flies off. And there it is, the god of trade in action. You let your thoughts drift now, picturing that shepherd a week later, holding the rock and wondering why none of his goats are pregnant, and why that handsome stranger never came back. Meanwhile, Hermes is probably inventing dice with one hand, and pickpocketing someone's belt with the other. And still you can't help but like him, because while most gods on Olympus throw thunderbolts or demand sacrifices, Hermes gives you a game, a puzzle, a reason to laugh, even when things are clearly rigged. As the sky dims and stars begin to yawn across the horizon, Hermes presses those winged sandals to the earth again, crouches low, and lifts off. No destination, no plan, just flight for flight's sake. You close your eyes and follow that motion, quick, clever, impossible to hold. The whisper of feathers against wind, the sound of laughter at the edge of sleep. You're floating now, weightless on a high breeze, watching Hermes blur past mountaintops and clouds like he's allergic to standing still. With every flap of those golden sandals, he gains not just speed but something stranger. Access, places no other god dares to go. Hermes slips into like it's a side quest in a game only he understands. And tonight, you follow him to a place few living eyes ever see, the underworld. Now, don't panic. It's not as spooky as you'd think, not when Hermes is your guide. You glide just behind him as he strolls right past the gates, dodges a few shades of the dead, and casually tosses Cerberus a glowing bone he probably stole from someone important. The three-headed dog growls, whimpers, then lays down like a bribed bouncer at a nightclub. Hermes gives you a wink. This is his other job, psychopomp, which is an incredibly spooky word that basically means soul escort. When mortals die, it's Hermes who appears, sandals whispering across the veil, ready to lead them to Hades. No fuss, no drama, just Hermes, showing up like a friendly Uber driver with wings and a suspicious grin. The mortals, understandably, are often confused, but Hermes never judges. He talks to them, sometimes sings, maybe even makes a joke, because if you've got to face the afterlife, better to do it with the only Olympian who might slip you a joke on the way down. Scholars still argue whether this duty was a reward or a punishment. After all, Hermes volunteers to go where no other gods want to. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's necessary. And maybe, for a trickster like Hermes, it's the one thing he does out of something resembling actual compassion. But don't get too sentimental. Just as quickly as he enters Hades, Hermes is out again, this time with a handful of secrets tucked into his sleeve. Because, while he's down there, he listens. He hears things, whispers from forgotten heroes, deals struck in darkness, wishes never granted. And when he returns to the world of the living, he keeps those secrets like trading cards, some valuable, some cursed, all dangerously fun to show off at the wrong moment. Back in the sunlit world, Hermes shakes off the gloom of the underworld like a wet dog. You follow as he lands in a bustling agora, the marketplace alive with sound. He drops a few underworld trinkets on a merchant's store, nothing cursed, and pockets a honey cake in return. He winks. No one saw him pay. He definitely didn't pay. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some ancient sources suggest Hermes invented dice while bored in the underworld. Yes, dice, the ultimate game of chance, born from boredom and bones. You imagine him rolling the first pair on Hades' kitchen floor, watching them clatter like the teeth of old ghosts, then grinning wide. Because Hermes doesn't need chaos. He is chaos with good lighting and excellent calves. You wander with him a little longer. He slips into a wrestling match between two mortals, throws both to the ground at once, declares himself champion, and vanishes before they can argue. He appears again at a roadside inn, tells a riddle that makes no sense, accepts 3 roasted figs as payment, and disappears before anyone notices the coin purse is missing. It's exhausting just watching him, but also kind of fun, because, unlike the other gods so obsessed with power, war, seduction, Hermes moves through the world like it's a playground made of stories. And here's something soft to tuck under your pillow. Hermes is the only Olympian who regularly walks among mortals without thunder, terror, or divine ego. He walks. He listens. He laughs. You lie back, heart slowed to the rhythm of sandals on stone, as Hermes rises into the air once more, and for a moment just one he hovers, looking back, as if to say, "Want to see what I'll steal next?" You barely have time to blink before Hermes darts off again, this time toward a horizon of burning oranges and sleepy blues, the kind of sunset that seems to know it's being watched. He doesn't need a reason. That's the thing about Hermes. Sometimes he moves because he must, and sometimes he moves because stillness is unbearable. Tonight, His sandals skim the tops of olive trees as he loops lazily toward a mortal village just finishing dinner. Smoke curls from clay chimneys, goats bleat half-heartedly, and someone is singing a lullaby to a cranky toddler who probably won TB asleep for hours. But Hermes doesn't stop, because he's got deliveries, scrolls tucked under his arms, secret treaties, love poems from Aphrodite's anonymous admirers, threats from Ares, written in all caps, maybe even an invoice from Hephaestus. Someone always owes her. He darts from house to temple to palace like a divine courier, and every now and then he opens a scroll to read it first. Why? Because he's Hermes, and if the gods wanted privacy, they wouldn't have let him handle their mail. You settle into the rhythm of it, winged sandals scraping gently against tile roofs, the occasional startled rooster, a papyrus scroll slipping through an open window. Even when the gods argue, they never take the job away from him, because he's fast, efficient, and he never forgets an address, even if he sometimes swaps names just to spice things up. Here's a fun historical fact to tuck behind your ear. In ancient Athens, Hermes was also considered the god of boundaries. Not just physical ones, like city walls and door frames, but the abstract kind too. Thresholds, transitions, moments where one thing becomes another. It makes sense, doesn't it? He's always in between Olympus and Earth, life and death, truth and mischief. Historians still argue whether this liminal role made Hermes more human than divine or more divine, because he never played by either side's rules. But back to Hermes on his nighttime run. Eventually, he lands on a flat stone outside a shepherd's hut. It's quiet, the moon is low, he leans against a tree and sighs like a teenager after a long day of texting and minor Fellini. And then he does something new. He sits. You almost don't believe it. But there he is, watching the stars, fiddling with the corner of a worn pouch. Inside, tiny dice, carved from animal knuckles, smoothed with years of use, stained faintly with olive oil and bad decisions. He tosses them onto the dirt. They're land snake eyes. He snorts, tosses them again, double six. Hermes is not surprised. These dice have never behaved normally. Probably cursed, or enchanted, or both. And here's your quirky tidbit of the section. Some ancient gambling dens would pray to Hermes before throwing dice. Not for luck but for forgiveness. Because everyone knew, if your luck changed too fast, he was probably involved. You hear the faint rustle of Hermes' voice. Now he's whispering to himself. Stories, maybe, jokes, the names of mortals he likes, and the ones he owes favors to. And just when the moment feels still, like maybe he'll finally take a nap, he's up, stretching, moving again. Back to Olympus, maybe, to another village. Possibly to steal a chicken. Yes, definitely. He grabs a chicken. It squawks. He vanishes, and somewhere the gods probably sigh, because Hermes may be the messenger, but he never guarantees peace. He's a middleman, a trickster, a feather-footed chaos agent with a soft spot for underdogs and zero patience for rules. You let that settle in your chest, warm and odd, because deep down you suspect the world needs at least one god who knows how to slip past locked doors, and sometimes leaves laughter instead of lightning. You wake up, or rather, dream deeper and find yourself walking alongside Hermes again, only now you're in a dusty mountain pass. The wind pulls at your sleeves, there's a smell of pine resin, baked stone, and something metallic. Coin, maybe? Hermes stops. He kneels. He brushes aside a clump of gravel to reveal a small stack of what else shiny trinkets and silver rings. It's a roadside shrine, Those odd pillar statues with a head on top and, well, an anatomically assertive square base. Welcome to Hermes' unofficial mailbox network. Mortals leave offerings at these little shrines for safe travel, luck in trade, or sometimes just to confess something nobody else should hear. They whisper into the stone and hope Hermes is in the mood to listen. Sometimes he takes the offering and just sells it to the next traveler. Because tonight, we're stepping into Hermes, the god of travel and commerce. And let us be honest, travel and commerce are both fancy words for stuff moving where it's not supposed to. Hermes adores that. You follow him down from the hills, sandals barely touching the soil. He slides into the nearest port town, like it's his favorite cafe. People here know his vibe. Fishermen nod when they pass a herm near the docks. Merchants rub their coin pouches and mutter tiny prayers. Even the pickpockets tip their caps after all. Hermes invented their profession too. He strolls through the agora, this time wearing a long cloak and a wide grin. You can almost hear the gears spinning behind his forehead. And then he starts trading, not just goods, stories. He stops at a spice vendor and tells her about a thunderstorm he outran over the Ionian Sea. Gives him a clove. He finds a potter and describes a dream where Athena lost her helmet and had to attend a war meeting in a cooking pot. The potter laughs so hard he nearly drops his kill tongs. Hermes pockets a ceramic whistle. This is Hermes' true gift, not lies. Exactly. Not the cold scams of modern fiction, but the kind of mischief that enchants you into forgetting you just gave away 3 figs, a length of rope, and your last gold earring. And here's a fun historical footnote for your night. Hermes was considered the patron god of merchants and thieves, 2 sides of the same and yes, ancient Greeks knew it was ironic. That was the point. He is the god of the exchange, not the ethics of it. So when you see Hermes sneak a ring off a merchant's table while simultaneously blessing his coin box, don't bother reconciling it. That's his paradox to live with. Historians still argue whether Hermes genuinely believed in balance or whether he just liked living in contradiction. Back in the market, he invents the concept of receipts, little clay tokens stamped with trade seals. He calls them anti-forget papers. They catch on fast. He also invents, possibly in the same afternoon, the wallet. Out of necessity, because people keep giving him things, and also because he keeps stealing them. You watch as he barters a thunderbolt-shaped pin with a traveling bard. In return, the bard offers a song. Hermes grins, takes the pin and the song, and vanishes somewhere behind you. A goat bleats in frustration, because of course Hermes traded it for a lyre he left on someone's windowsill 3 towns ago. As twilight sinks in, you follow him out of the agora and into a narrow alley, dim and quiet. He leans against the wall, counting stolen buttons like they're sacred relics, and you realize something small but strange. For Hermes, theft is never about the thing. It's about the act. The flicker of adrenaline, the grin of getting away with it, the moment between stillness and motion, where anything might happen. So if you ever lose a sock, a coin, or a really good idea, well, he probably just borrowed it. The world shifts again. The wind cools. You feel it in your chest, a hush that isn't silence, but distance. Not miles, not time, something deeper. Because Hermes is heading back to the one place no Olympian brags about visiting. The underworld, but this time it's not business. No soul to guide, no divine package to deliver, no dramatic entrance through cracks in the earth. He just walks in, no fuss. You follow. Footsteps muted on dark stone. The light fades gently around you, never cruel. just quieter. The shadows fold in softly, like heavy velvet, and up ahead, Hermes stops at a familiar gate. Cerberus growls once, then sighs like a tired guard dog on overtime. Hermes scratches him behind one ear. The middle head, the polite one. It's funny how often he comes here. Most gods avoid it. They hate the cold permanence, the stone stillness, the bone-deep rules. But Hermes treats it like a recurring appointment. Tonight, he isn't just escorting the dead, he's exploring, picking through the underworld's corners like a tourist who got bored of the guidebook. You trail him down corridors that weren't meant for footsteps anymore. Old myths hang in the air like cobwebs. You pass a whisper that might have once been Orpheus. You catch a glimpse of a ghostly banquet where no one eats, and in the far-off distance, a low, cold river murmurs a current made of memory. Hermes pauses near a crumbling wall and sets something down. A sprig of myrtle, a peace offering, maybe, or an inside joke only the dead would understand. Here's your mainstream fact for the hour. In Greek belief, Hermes was the only Olympian allowed to move freely between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Even Hades doesn't mind, because Hermes never overstays, never judges, never takes too much. Well, almost never. There's a fringe story buried in a dusty scroll somewhere that once Hermes did take something. Not gold, not a soul, a secret. The kind of secret the underworld tries to keep buried under layers of myth, grief, and ritual. No one knows exactly what it was, only that when he came back up, Hermes looked a little older, a little quieter. Historians still argue whether this moment even happened, or if it was just poetic rumor passed around like forbidden fruit. But you notice it now, in the way Hermes walks. Still quick, still sly, but with a certain weight in the heels, as if even gods carry something heavy in their pockets sometimes. Back on the surface, the air feels thinner. You breathe in stars. He breathes in starlight and chicken grease he's already stolen. Someone's dinner from a windowsill. Again, because grief never sticks to him long, he sheds sorrow like snakeskin and dances back into mischief with barely a pause. But tonight, you sense something different. He pauses beneath a fig tree, stares up at the moon, and tells a joke, quietly, to no one. And then he laughs to himself. Just a small laugh, almost shy, like he's remembering someone who used to laugh that way, too. Maybe a soul he once guided. Maybe a mortal he liked more than he meant to. Because that's the thing about Hermes. He's fast, but sometimes he stops. And when he does, the world listens. You close your eyes now, wrapped in shadow and fig-scented breeze. Somewhere behind you, a ghost exhales. Somewhere ahead, a god is already sprinting toward his next mistake. But for a moment longer, just a moment, you rest in the stillness between footsteps. You blink, and the shadows peel away like theater curtains. Hermes is already somewhere new again. He's lying upside down in a tree now, legs dangling over a branch, fiddling with something shiny and definitely stolen. The tree creaks lazily in the breeze, and below, the world stretches out in olive groves and lazy hills. But even in rest, his fingers won't stop moving. He pulls out a pouch and spills its contents across his chest. Tiny knuckle bones, shaped dice, bits of string, stones with odd symbols carved into them. You're about to ask what they are, when he flicks one, and it spins into the air, landing on a flat rock beside you. Want to play a game? He asks, without looking at you. And just like that, you're in. Because Hermes doesn't just steal things, he invents them. Board games, street wrestling, hand-clapping rhymes passed down by shepherd boys and sailors. And yes, some historians genuinely believe that Hermes invented gambling. Not just dice, but the entire idea that you could throw an object, assign it meaning, and live or die by what it lands on. That the universe might be rigged, or that maybe you're clever enough to beat it. He laughs now, tossing another die. It hits a pebble, bounces, and lands on its edge. Hermes raises an eyebrow. Unlucky or interesting? You've never met a god who looks so at home doing absolutely nothing and simultaneously everything. Later, he joins a group of boys wrestling in the dust outside a temple. He's disguised again. Older this time, maybe 17. No one knows it's him. He throws one, then another, laughs when they get back up. It's not about dominance for him. It's about movement, learning where the body bends, where balance gives out, where laughter blooms under scraped knees. Here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Ancient Greeks believed Hermes taught mortals wrestling techniques, especially those that emphasized agilities and trickery over brute strength. So when you picture him wrestling, don't think of a chiseled titan. Think of someone small, fast, and impossible to pin. He wins, of course, mostly by cheating, or distracting his opponent with a bad pun mid. Then he's off again, running along a stone wall, arms wide like he's trying to fly without sandals. And then, food. He finds a roadside cookfire and sweet talks an old woman into letting him wrap roasted lamb in a flatbread with onions and herbs. He takes a bite, pauses, and grins. You know, he says with his mouth full, this might be the best thing anyone's ever invented. Was it the first burrito? Probably not. But it might be the prototype. You picture a world where fast food is divine, where the god of speed hands you your order in 30 seconds or less, and then disappears before you can ask for sauce. Hermes hands half the flatbread to a child, tells her she's actually a princess in disguise, and zips away before she can ask what that even means. He doesn't need thanks or applause. He just needs momentum. Historians still argue whether Hermes meant to create these things, games, meals, sports, or if he was just bored and gifted and reckless enough to leave miracles behind in his wake. Because, to Hermes, invention isn't sacred, it's casual. An accidental flick of the wrist, a skipped rock that changes a coastline. You watch him vanish around a bend, and for a moment, it's peaceful. The kind of quiet that comes not from stillness, but from perfect kinetic balance. A god in motion, a world reshaped with every step. You lie back in the tall grass, dice in hand, listening to the soft echoes of a game still being played. Somewhere, Hermes is already inventing the rules for the next round. Dawn yawns across the hills, the sky fading from charcoal to honeyed blue, and Hermes, he's perched on a hillside, staring down at a pasture, not to steal this time. He's watching. Below, a mortal named Batas tends his herdan. Older man with a crooked back and a face that spent decades squinting into sunlight. He hums tunelessly while stacking firewood. Hermes rubs his chin. He's up to something. You've seen this look before. Half divine curiosity, half chaotic mischief. A moment where something mundane catches his attention, and he decides to poke it with a stick just to see what it does. Hermes had, just a few hours earlier, stolen some immortal cattle. Again, but now he needs a witness. Or rather, someone to test. So he approaches Batas, old man. Simple, harmless. Hermes claps him on the back like an old friend, points to a rocky outcrop nearby, and whispers, I'm leaving some cattle over there for a while. Don't tell anyone, okay? Especially not the guy I stole them from. Batus, clearly flattered by the attention of a handsome young god in disguise, nods earnestly. You can count on me, he says, chest puffed up. Hermes thanks him, tosses him a coin either, a tip or a bribe. Who can sigh and vanishes. Then, just a few hours later, he returns. In disguise again. New face, new voice. "Hey, old man," he says casually. "Didn't I hear there were some divine cows hiding around here?" Batas hesitates. You can practically see the gears turning rusted. Slow. He squints, then he folds like a badly built clay pot. He points to the cows. Hermes bursts into laughter. Cackles, wipes a tear, reveals himself. And what does Batus get? A stone-cold transformation. Literally, Hermes turns him into a rock. Yes, a rock. One of those ancient, half-crumbled standing stones you pass on a hike and assume was once part of a fence. Except this one used to be a guy. Mainstream mythology loves this moment. It's a test of loyalty, of trust, of mortal frailty. But Hermes, he just finds it funny. And here's your quirky tidbit. Ancient travelers sometimes claimed they'd passed the rock that used to be Batus. They'd leave coins at its base, just in case he still remembered what it was like to be Historians still argue whether this was a warning tale or just a cosmic prank gone too far, because Hermes doesn't punish like other gods. He doesn't throw lightning or unleash plagues. He just removes you from the board. No malice, just detachment. You trail him now as he skips from mountaintop to mountaintop, humming to himself. He's already forgotten Batus. Or maybe he hasn't? Maybe he passes that stone sometimes and smirks. Maybe he talks to it. You never really know with Hermes. But as you fly with him over a sleepy valley, a constellation catches your eye. 3 bright stars, lined like a shepherd's staff. Hermes pauses, floating mid-air. He sees it too, and just for a moment, you wonder, did he feel bad? Did he lift Batus to the sky? Just a little? Some say yes, others say Hermes doesn't do regret. You land gently beside him in the dusk. He sits cross-legged on a cloud and opens a fig like it's a secret. And with juice on his fingers, he whispers, "I never promised not to come back and check." Then he flicks the fig at a passing eagle and vanishes again. That's Hermes Quig, cruel, strangely kind. You lie on that cloud a little longer, watching the stars. One of them blinks, just once. Maybe Bates said, "Thank you." You drift down from that fig-scented cloud, the memory of Batus fading behind you like an old tune, and find yourself now standing at the edge of a festival. Torches flicker in the dusk. Drums thump lazily in the background. Laughter spills through the air like honey from a cracked jar. And where there's a party, there's Hermes. Except tonight, he's not the guest, he's the reason for the celebration. Welcome to the Hermia festival held in his honor. Think, track meet meets carnival meets. We might commit mild theft if the god approves. You watch as children dash barefoot down a dusty path, racing one another in the name of agility and quickness. Their feet blur across the earth. A priest, probably underpaid and definitely overwhelmed, calls out their names and tries to keep order. But Hermes doesn't want order. He wants movement, speed, a little chaos with your olives and wine. You spot him in the crowd, disguised again. Naturally, this time, as a merchant complete with fake beard and a tray of suspiciously identical blessed coins he's offering in exchange for figs, trinkets, and possibly your family goat. He's not fooling you, though the grin gives him away every time. He winks, drops a coin in a child's basket, then steals it back before she notices. You laugh softly, because tonight's about celebrating what Hermes represents: cleverness, youth, mischief, and yes motion. Here's your mainstream fact to savor like fresh pomegranate seeds. In ancient Athens, Hermes was the patron of gymnasiums and athletic competitions, particularly those focused on speed and skill rather than brute force. His statues stood in training grounds, half smiling as boys practiced wrestling for traces, and let's be honest, showing off. But here's your fringe tidbit. During some versions of the Hermes, social roles were reversed. Slaves could mock their masters, and sometimes even trade places for a day. Hermes, god of in-betweens, sanctioned the blur between power and powerlessness. Tonight, the lines are soft. Children throw figs at elders. Merchants swap prices someone accidentally marries a goat. No one's sure if it's legal. And Hermes is in the thick of it all, laughing so hard he nearly drops a wine jug he never paid for. You sit beside him now, on a low stone wall warmed by torchlight. He's got grape juice on his fingers and a stray olive pit stuck in his sleeve. Want to see something fun? He whispers, eyes glinting. He points across the square at a pile of amphorae. You blink, they're gone. He's holding one in his lap. It's filled with water, ambrosia ore, possibly frogs. No one knows, and no one will check until it's too late. The night spins on. Hermes orchestrates small pranks, like a conductor. He ties sandals together under tables. He swaps temple donation boxes with empty fruit baskets. He pins a scroll reading IOU Zeus to the governor's front door. And the mortals, they love it. They laugh. They chase him. They shout his name like a cheer and a curse all at once. Because Hermes doesn't just steal, he gives back something stranger permission to bend the rules, to move fast, to laugh at things that feel too heavy the rest of the year. Historians still argue whether festivals like these were meant to mock Hermes or to honor him, or if he tricked everyone into thinking they were different. You lean back now, full of figs and laughter, watching the torch smoke rise into the stars. And Hermes, he's dancing with the children, not leading, not following, just spinning, dizzy, caught in the joy of a moment that knows it will pass. But for now, it doesn't matter, because he's here, and that, somehow, is enough. The festival fades like a wine-soaked memory, leaving the air still and heavy with the sweet burn of torch smoke and laughter long gone. You follow Hermes again, barefoot now, your feet still remembering the drumbeat rhythms of the race, the chase, the cheer. But tonight, he isn't rushing. He's walking, slow, unhurried, and that's how you know something is off. Hermes only walks like this when he's thinking, or hiding something, or very red. He leads you along a mountain ridge, the moon casting silvery light over your path, like it's being unspooled by a lazy goddess with nothing better to do. Then he stops, not at a temple, not at a palace, but at a cave, low, round, and dripping with moss. The kind of cave you wouldn't notice unless you were actively looking to not be found. He steps inside, gestures for you to follow. And in the dark, you see its small shelves carved into the stone, filled with things. Not treasure, exactly. Not sacred offerings. More like trophies, trinkets, the discarded spoils of divine mischief. A golden brooch from a nymph who never noticed it missing. A chipped goblet that still hums with Dionysus' breath. A parchment signed, "Don't open this. Love, Apollo." You've stumbled upon Hermes' secret stash. No one else knows about this place. Not the other gods. Not even Zeus. Because sometimes, even the god of motion needs a place where he can stop. Here's your mainstream mythology gem. Hermes was often associated with hidden knowledge, not just in his role as a messenger, but as a guardian of secret places, sacred mysteries, and dangerous truths. He's the only Olympian who keeps things not to hoard them, but to remember them, to catalogue moments that passed too quickly to matter to anyone else. And here's your fringe tidbit, whispered like a huff. Some ancient texts hinted that Hermes once tried to hide an entire temple just to see if he could. No one ever found it. It might still be hidden. Or maybe it's this cave. You'll glance around, and suddenly the walls feel deeper, older, more aware. He sits cross-legged beside a small fire now, striking flint against a borrowed blade, and you realize there's something he hasn't said, something he won't say. So you wait, because Hermes doesn't speak plainly unless it's a punchline. Eventually, he looks up, and in that flickering firelight, his voice softens. Most gods need worship. Statues, altars, sacrifices, quotes. He smiles faintly. I just need someone to notice. You blink, and suddenly he's juggling. Rocks, coins, a frog. Mood broken, back to normal, back to pretending. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever wanted more than games and gold, whether he felt the same kind of loneliness mortals do when they stare too long at the stars, but they miss the point, because Hermes doesn't stay in one place long enough to ask that question. He throws a cloak over the cave entrance, now erasing it from view. It'll vanish with the morning fog, and you'll never find it again unless he wants you to. You follow him down the ridge, and he whistles a tune no one else remembers, probably something he stole from a dream. As the path widens and the valley stretches out beneath you, you wonder how many other caves, how many other secrets, and what does a god do with all the moments no one else remembers? You're not sure when the stars came out again. They've crept in quietly while you were walking behind Hermes, who by now realize almost never announces anything. Not his departures, and definitely not the moments that matter most. Tonight, you've reached the edge of a wide plain, flat, open, dusty enough to dry your tongue, the kind of place where stories either start or end, depending on your direction. And of course, Hermes is there already waiting, barefoot, with his toes in a shallow stream, humming some ancient tune that sounds like it was written by a board breeze. He's got a scroll in his lap. He's reading. Yes, reading. Hermes isn't all trickery and tumble. He's also, inconveniently for the rest of the gods, extremely smart. Here's your mainstream fact for tonight. Hermes is credited with inventing writing systems, or at least inspiring them. Letters, symbols, hidden marks carved into stone or scratched onto clay. Wherever someone needed to say something without being there to say it, Hermes was lurking behind the ink. But here's where things get weirder. He doesn't just write for clarity. He writes to confuse. To codes, puzzles, symbols, layered over other symbols. Some say Hermes invented the idea of the riddle, and not the kind with a clever answer. The kind that changes you while you're trying to solve it. Like, which is faster, truth or feet? Or, if the god of messages leaves one undelivered, did he mean it? You'll sit beside him now, watching his fingers trace a curling phrase written in no language you recognize. It looks ancient, and also brand new. Secret for later, he murmurs. You nod like you understand. You don't. He folds the scroll, tucks it behind a loose stone in the riverbank, and kicks at the water with sudden boredom. Just like that, the moment is gone. He's up again, pacing the plain, hands in his pockets, whistling. But something lingers, a weight in the air, like the moment before lightning, but with no storm in sight. And then it hits you. Hermes is thinking about boundaries. Again, you've heard it before. Hermes is the god of borders, transitions, thresholds, but those are just big words for change. He's the god of the the cracks in the story, the space between one step and the next. That's why he invented the stafter caduceus. Two snakes twined around a rod, wings sprouting at the top like thoughts escaping the skull. Mainstream mythology will tell you. It's a symbol of diplomacy, of peace, of negotiation between opposites. But Hermes, he uses it like a conversation starter, a door opener, a key for locks that aren't made of wood or metal, but doubt. He spins it now, lazily, sending the snakes twirling like they're dizzy and deeply amused. You lean back and watch as he tosses the staff high into the air. It never lands. He doesn't look for it. Probably doesn't need to. Do you ever stop moving? You ask. He grins. I stop plenty. I just don't stay. You sit in silence for a while. Just the wind, the stars, the soft plink of water on stone. And here's your quirky tidbit for the section. In some obscure corners of myth, Hermes wasn't just a messenger, he was a dream guide, a whisper in your sleep, a nudge toward the stranger road, the voice that tells you to turn left when logic says right. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor or something more mystical. But if you've ever dreamed of a door that shouldn't exist and opened it anyway there's a good chance Hermes was there. He rises now, stretching like a cat in a sunbeam. I've got places not to be, he says with a shrug. And with that, he's gone, not vanished yet. Elsewhere, and you're left in the quiet again, blinking at the staff that's somehow back in the dirt beside you, still warm, still whispering. The next time you find Hermes, he's not flying, he's not whispering secrets, he's not even stealing anything, at least. Not visibly. He's sitting cross-legged on the roof of a house, a very large, very important, very marble-covered house. You recognize it by the golden eagle carved above the doorway's temple, which, of course, makes this both bold and profoundly inadvisable. But Hermes doesn't care. He's eating an apple and watching the clouds. You ever wonder what would happen? He muses, mouth full, if no one sent messages anymore. He tosses the core behind him. It lands with a divine thud somewhere in the sacred herb garden. You sit beside him, there's room, barely, and watch as the temple below goes about its very serious, incense-heavy business. Priests chant, devotees kneel. Someone cries softly beside a statue of Zeus, holding a lightning bolt like a trophy. And Hermes, he yawns, because messages, real ones, rarely pass through stone temples. They travel in whispers. Sideways, glances, rushed steps, a love note slipped under a wine jug. Hermes knows this. He's the god of communication. Yes, but not the loud kind. He prefers the half-heard word, the muttered joke, the wink that means something else entirely. Here's your mainstream moment. Hermes was revered not just as the messenger of the gods, but as the god of language itself, spoken, written, symbolic, and even unspoken. Every time you hold back a comment, or drop a subtle hint, or lie with flair, Hermes is there, sometimes grinning, sometimes annoyed that you weren't witty. And here's your fringe gem. Some scholars believe Hermes was worshipped by spies, actual cloak and dagger types, the ones who carried coded scrolls in their boots and disappeared before dawn. Because no one understands double meanings quite like he does. You glance down at the temple entrance. A boy is sneaking in, scroll clutched to his chest. You can almost feel the tremble in his fingers. He pauses, bows low, and places it at the statue's feet, then runs. Think anyone will read it? You ask. Hermes squints. Nah, but he needed to leave it. That's the thing. You sit with that for a while. Sometimes it's not the message that matters. It's the act of sending it. A signal, a release, a confession too risky to say aloud. The clouds above shift into shapes that almost mean something. Hermes points. That one looks like a goat with authority issues. You laugh, and for a moment he smiles at you, not his usual trickster grin, but something quieter, like he's letting you in on a secret that even he doesn't joke about, because behind the speed and sparkle, Hermes is at his core a listener, not a judge, not a punisher, just a god who catches what others miss. The broken syllables, the messages no one else would bother to deliver. You lie back on the roof, the marbles warm from sun and memory, and Hermes hums a tune without melody, tapping it softly into the stone with his heel. It might be a lullaby, or it might be a code. Either way, it's meant for you. You wake. Or maybe you never slept, hard to tell now, with the scent of lavender and crushed time in the air. And Hermes, he's sitting on a low wall near a crumbling villa, one leg bouncing like he's trying not to explode from sheer boredom. He tosses a coin into the air, catches it, tosses it again. It's his own face on both sides. Classic. You look around, the place feels abandoned, not haunted, just forgotten, like a room you left mid-sentence and never returned to. Hermes watches your eyes scan the cracked mosaic floor, the faded mural of nymphs and lions, the chipped columns. Once belonged to a poet, he says, gesturing vaguely with the coin. Didn't like gods, loved metaphors, terrible cook. He hops down from the wall and kicks a rock across the path, like he est punting regrets. You follow, because we're nearly at the edge now. Not of the world, of the story. And Hermes is twitchy, that kind of soft divine anxiety that happens when even he can feel something winding down. Tonight, you learn that Hermes isn't afraid of endings. He just doesn't trust them. He's spent his whole immortal life dancing between beginnings and transitions, climbing in windows and slipping out of back doors. So when the narrative slows, he starts testing the seams. He points to a fig tree and asks, what if that tree was a doorway? Then tries to walk through it. He crouches down by a snail and says, what if this guy holds all the lost letters I never delivered? He listens. The snail says nothing, but Hermes nods, like it told him something deeply important. Because here's your mainstream truth for tonight. Hermes wasn't just the god of movement, he was the god of interpretation, of dreams, omens, symbols that almost make sense. He's the reason a bird flying east might mean love, or danger, or both. And here's your quirky tidbit to tuck in your sleeve. In some cult traditions, Hermes wasn't just a god of signs, he was considered a sign himself, a living riddle, a divine question mark that walked, talked, and occasionally borrowed your sandals. You pause by a broken sundial, the shadow frozen at noon. Hermes whistles at it, then steals the gnome under sundial's shadow-casting spike. Time is overrated, he shrugs, tucking it into his satchel like a souvenir. You wonder how many artifacts he's pocketed across the centuries. The first spoon, a poet's unfinished line, the concept of maybe. He sits again, this time cross-legged under the fig tree, and starts carving into the dirt with a twig. You watch the symbols form, curves, angles, loops that defy translation, a script that probably means nothing, or everything, or both. Want to know a secret? He asks. He doesn't wait for your answer. I never meant to be a god, just wanted to go faster than everyone else. Then one day, they started praying, and I didn't say no. He grins, but his eyes linger on the horizon. He's already thinking of what comes next, where he'll dash off to, what idea he'll steal or accidentally invent. Historians still argue whether Hermes likes being a god, whether he ever slows down long enough to feel the weight of it. But tonight, you'll see him settle. Just for a breath, he leans back on his elbows and says, if you ever get lost, leave a shoe in the road, I'll find it. And you believe him, because if anyone knows how to trace a path through confusion, it's Hermes, the god of shortcuts, the patron of liminal spaces, the thief of boredom. You lie in the grass now, watching him toss the coin one last time. It spins, hangs in the air, longer than it should, then vanishes. Just like that. The world has quieted. Even the breeze seems to hold its breath. And Hermes, once everywhere, now here sits on a low stone at the foot of a hill. Quietly, threading a string through a seashell, you followed him across fields, festivals, tombs, and temples. But this feels like the edge of something, not a cliff, not a crisis. Just a soft, frayed hem in the fabric of the world where things unravel gently like a lullaby that forgets how to end. Hermes doesn't speak. He just ties a knot, then another, then slips the shell into a pouch. "What was that for?" you whisper. He shrugs. "Might be useful, or it might just be pretty." That's the thing with Hermes. Intention is optional. He does. He moves, he leaves traces, and then he's on to the next thing. Tonight, though, there's no next thing. Just you. Just him. And the stillness he rarely allows himself to sit in. You look up. A meteor skims the sky. Hermes doesn't flinch. He points. "Mist," he says. Then grins. And here's your final mainstream factor too, like a last olive. In late antiquity, Hermes was blended with the Egyptian god, Thoth, god of wisdom, writing, and the moon. Together, they became Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, who whispered alchemy and mystery into the ears of early philosophers. So yes, the fast-talking, sandal-flicking trickster god was also once seen as the guardian of hidden knowledge, which, if you've been paying attention, tracks surprisingly well. He was never just the messenger. He was the one who knew what not to say, to. And your final quirky tidbit. Some ancient dream manuals describe Hermes not as a god, but as a moment, a fleeting shift in the dream, a door that wasn't there before, a single word scribbled into the corner of a dream scroll that you can remember when you wake up, but you know it mattered. Historians still argue whether these writings were metaphor or actual mystical systems. Hermes doesn't clarify. He likes it better when you're almost sure. Now, as night folds itself over the hills like a well-worn cloak, he dusts off his knees. He offers you a piece of dried fig, already half-eaten. You take it anyway. He glances up at the sky. "Okay," he says softly. "Time to go, not be somewhere." And you know what that means. You've reached the soft landing at the end of the sprint. The god of movement is ready to vanish. But before he does, he turns. And for the first time, tonight, maybe the first time ever, he speaks plainly. "Next time you lose something," he says, "check your pocket twice. You might find a better version." Then he disappears. No flash. No gust of wind, just ... not there anymore. Only the soft echo of his sandals, fading into nothing, and you lie back, sighing into the grass, heavy with stories that may or may not be real. But who cares? You followed the god of thieves, of words, of every tiny sideways slip the world makes when it's trying to tell you something important, and you listened, and maybe that's enough. Now everything slows. The night deepens, folds itself around your thoughts like silk. You feel your body sinking, not falling, but settling into something gentle, a warm, weightless, quiet, the kind Hermes never stays in for long. You breathe in, and the air is soft with thyme, fig, and the last cool trace of a breeze that once carried 1,000 stolen things. The stars above stretch longer now, their edges blur, lazy and kind. Your muscles relax without needing permission. Even your thoughts feel like they've taken off their shoes and curled up beside you. Maybe you're still holding something he gave you, a coin, a word, a feeling that someone, somewhere, will always be watching the crossroads. And if you ever need him, again really need him, you'll know where to look. Just between the moment before you speak and the second after, that's where he waits. Not to judge, not to stay, but to remind you, Every end is a beginning in disguise, and every breath, even the slowest, is its own kind of journey. So for now, stay still, let your thoughts drift, your limbs sink, your breath slow. You're safe here, in this strange space between stories. Hermes has already moved on, but you can rest. You've earned it. Sweet dreams.